President of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, is planning to end a long-standing military pact with the US. That's after Washington cancelled a tourist visa issued to a Filipino senator and one of his close political allies. And he made his feelings clear about the issue.
Si BATO, di nila patuon sa Amerika. I'm warning you, this is the first time. Pag hindi ninyo ginawa ang correction dyan, one, I will terminate the bases visiting forces agreement. Tapusin ko yung putang ina.
The so-called Visiting Forces Agreement has been in place since 1999. It provides a framework for US troops coming to the Philippines for joint training exercises. If it is cancelled, it would affect more than 300 military personnel. And analysts are concerned that wider economic and diplomatic ties may also be impacted. OK, let's get more on this now from political scientist and foreign affairs analyst Richard Heydarian. Good to have you on, Richard. If this does happen, if the cancellation happens, how significantly do you think it would impact US-Philippines relations?
Well, to begin with, we have to see whether this is going to move forward. I think it has to be clear to everyone that as far as the Philippines' foreign policy is concerned, no matter how popular President Duterte is and no matter how strong a leader he is, he doesn't necessarily have the unilateral power over determining the country's strategic direction, especially when it comes to relationship with the United States, which is century-old, and especially because the Philippines defense establishment and other centers of influence have very strong ties with the United States and Pentagon. So now we see that the Defense Secretary of the Philippines and some senior officials openly and contesting the report by the spokesman of the president that he has already ordered the termination notice to be sent to the Americans. So we are seeing perhaps some internal pushback already happening right now. Now, if the VFA is indeed taken out, that means the end of significant amount of American military aid to the Philippines, which amounted to $1.8 billion over the past 2 decades. And it's going to make it very difficult for the Americans to operationalize, because the VFA is the software that allows for the operationalization of the hardware of the bilateral alliance, the Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951. So it will be very difficult for Americans to give the kind of special forces training, the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations assistance, and also to help the Philippines by prepositioning their military equipment close to contested islands in the South China Sea, where the Philippines and China have territorial and maritime disputes.
If we look at the way that Donald Trump acts as a president, be it with China, Iran, there's numerous examples. He's very keen on imposing sometimes sanctions, sometimes tariffs to try and bend countries to his will. What kind of response would you anticipate from Washington if this agreement is cancelled?
Well, President Duterte and President Trump are supposed to have a conversation soon on this issue. This was the announcement that came out. But we have to keep in mind that President Trump and President Duterte have a very strong personal rapport. I think it's quite similar to President Trump and President Putin's rapport because of the similarity in terms of their character, their ideology, and their shared hatred of what they see as a liberal international or democratic opposition. Nonetheless, I think the pressure here could come not necessarily from President Trump, but by the American defense establishment and by the American, let's call it, deep state on the Philippine president, if ever he really wants to undermine bilateral relations with the United States in any significant way. The two countries have been allies for almost a century. President Duterte will be the first ever Filipino president to significantly downgrade that relationship since at least the withdrawal of American troops in the Philippines in 1992.
This pact, the fact that it could, as I understand, be cancelled by either party with just 180 days' notice, that suggests that there was always a kind of sense that this was a short-term deal that either party could just end whenever they feel like it.
Well, I think, first of all, there was complacency on the part of the United States that no one like President Duterte will ever make it through elections. Well, surprise, surprise. There was also, I think, complacency that there will be other centers of power trying to push back. But the reality here is that President Duterte is really angry at the United States, not only because of the travel ban or visa restriction imposed on some of his key allies, but there are concerns that the United States might actually move forward with asset freeze and other kinds of sanctions against the president himself down the road, especially when he's out of power. He's going to step down in 2022. So I think there was some complacency on the part of the United States. Now, the other thing we have to keep in mind is that this agreement has not been ratified by the U.S. Senate, but has been ratified by the Philippine Senate. So there's also a legal argument whether President Duterte himself, as the commander-in-chief and the head of the executive branch, can do this without the concurrence of the Philippine Senate. And interestingly, we see that even some of his allies, like Senator Pimentel and Gordon, have been also pushing back against this and suggesting that perhaps the Philippine Senate has to have a say on this. But previously, we saw the Philippines was able to unilaterally withdraw from international treaties, including the International Criminal Court, which may actually investigate President Duterte on allegations of crimes against humanity. And President Duterte was able to do that unilaterally without the concurrence of Senate. So we have a precedence when actually President Duterte really wants it, he can get out. Now, let's see what will his allies and the defense establishment who are close to the United States or believe in the importance of the alliance with the United States will do internally to prevent this from happening.
Richard, great to have you on. Appreciate your time. Political scientist, foreign affairs analyst Richard Heydarian.